Thank you. Morning, everyone. I bet you're pleased to sit down. I remember years of traipsing around the autumn fair with my parents, and there were never enough seats. So welcome. I'm delighted to be here today. As introduced, I'm going to talk about customers and how all of our behaviour as customers is changing and how that influences the way we shop. Before I do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are, and that's Springboard, a little bit about our company, just in case you haven't heard of us. Our focus is all about data and insights around customer behaviour and store and retail destination performance. So how is the retail market out there trading? And we do that by collecting data on footfall, so that's customer activity, numbers of people walking up and down the streets and the malls, and also retail sales. But we do that, we work with retailers and we work with retail centres, either high streets or shopping malls for owners and for store operators. And we collect the data continuously, 24/7, so we have data pumping through our systems every hour of every day throughout the year. And we deliver that on a daily basis, so we're able to see today what trading conditions were like yesterday. And we look at the entire bricks and mortar retail landscape. So we look at high streets, and everyone uses the word high streets as a generic term, but actually high streets in our world are the external environments, not undercover, not managed within a shopping mall. And then we look at shopping malls, and we also look at retail parks. So they're our out of town, larger retailers. So what's our coverage? Well, we've got nearly 1,500 separate locations in which we count footfall. And we do that using little automated counters that we install around the UK. And we cover over 400 different shopping sites. And that's across the UK, all four nations, east to west, north to south. And we're counting around 120 million individual counts a week. So you can imagine we've got quite a large team working on data back at the office. The correlation, the closeness of fit to our data to what's happening out there is really, really good. We've worked deliberately to make sure that we're reflecting the retail landscape. We're reflecting the layout of retail and how consumers shop. And a correlation, that's the closeness of fit between our counter, our network, and how people spend their money, is around 93%, so it's really close. And we've got 16 years worth of data. So we incorporated in 2002, and we've been collecting data since then. We've been publishing since 2008, so we've got this huge database and long-term series on looking at trends. We work with a huge range of different people, retailers, as I said, landlords of shopping malls, individual high streets, and all of those either take our counters or use our data in some shape or form to understand better how they're trading relative to the market in which we're all trading. So you might have seen some of our comments and our insights and data in the press. Look out for that as we move towards Christmas. Christmas is a particularly busy time for us. We're called upon a lot to comment on clearly what's happening in terms of Christmas trading and also, of course, Black Friday. So we cover broadcast and print. And if you want some insights, go to our website, register on our website. A lot of our insights are free of charge, and we're always producing reports post key trading days. So we produce reports on Easter and Black Friday and Christmas. All of those are free, and there are some other reports that are paid for but at a very low cost. So what does footfall data tell us about how customers are behaving and what they're doing? Well, there's three ways it does that. Firstly, we can look at the relationship of footfall to sales and why footfall is so important for all of our retail businesses. We can look at when customers shop, and that's really helpful in terms of running a business more efficiently. And also we can look at the success of stores in terms of pulling customers from malls or streets into store, so you can actually convert them into sales. So looking firstly at the relationship between footfall and sales, and I remember being on Radio 4 one day, and Simon Jack, the presenter, said to me, well, surely, Diane, in a world of online shopping, footfall isn't important anymore. And I'm not quite sure what he expected me to say, but of course I did say, yes, it is important, Simon. And it is. And what we've done is we've looked at the relationship between footfall, so that's the volume of activity in a place, and the amount of money that's generated. And you can see that there's a very direct line relationship. So the more people there are, the more money they spend. And that is logically the way we would imagine it to be. So that's the first tick in the box. Then we can start to look at how people shop and when they shop. And of course what we can do is, because we're collecting this data continuously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we can look at the split of footfall across days. Of course this has a direct impact upon your trade in terms of the days that you can attract trade. And what is interesting is that on the weekdays, Monday through Thursday, footfall is remarkably stable. There is very little difference, and this is across the UK, across a full year. It starts to climb on Friday and Saturday remains our peak trading day. Sunday attracts about 2/3 of the footfall that Saturday does, and you might see this reflected in your businesses. And that is a fairly consistent pattern that we're seeing. But it's helpful for you in understanding and relating that to how your stores are trading. Are you trading better on a Sunday than a Saturday? We've heard anecdotally from a lot of our clients that actually there are fewer people in malls and in streets on a Sunday, yet actually they spend longer and they make bigger purchases. We can also then look at footfall across the day. So when do people go out to shop? Well, unsurprisingly, the daytime hours, that's the hours that we trade in retail, 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock are our key hours. That attracts nearly 3/4 of all footfall across a 24-hour period. So that is the key time. But what is also interesting is that the period that is often called the dead period, between 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock, 14.5% of all footfall is between that period. So whether or not retail businesses should be staying open longer, that's a moot point. Some places they should, some places they shouldn't, but it is actually very interesting. And I'll talk a little bit more about the changes that are happening across the day in a minute. And then looking at the peak period, well, it's lunchtime. So you can see footfall rising very steeply up to lunchtime and then dropping away after lunch. But that does change slightly by day of the week. And you can see that lunchtime on a weekday, those coloured lines in the middle of the graph between the white and the blue line, which is white is Saturday and blue is Sunday, that's the weekdays. And the peak in the footfall in those days is slightly earlier than it is at the weekend. And you would expect that because people come out earlier, they're working, and that's when they grab their purchases. What footfall also does is tell us how people shop across the year. And I mean, this has always been a key point for retail, of course. When do you go into sale? When are your peak trading periods? And we've tracked this since we've been incorporated, since we've been trading, and that's back in 2002. And this pattern that we're seeing here, from a low point in January, rising up to a peak in August, then dropping slightly away in September and October, and moving very sharply up to a peak in December, is a pattern we've seen for years and years and years. But interestingly, it isn't the same for all types of town and all types of location. We've just completed a 2-year project with Manchester Met University and Cardiff University, looking at the types of towns that exist around the UK and what footfall tells about those towns. And actually what we found was really interesting, and we found that there are actually just 4 different types of towns. So if you're trading in a town, it doesn't mean that every town is the same. And we've termed them comparison towns, which are retail-driven towns, and they're what we would always think about as our standard retail town centre. And actually only 25%, a quarter of all our towns, are conventional standard retail towns, and they have the fit that's closest to that pattern that I've just shown you, with this huge peak at Christmas. But there are other types of towns, and if you look here, this is a holiday town, and the Christmas period in holiday towns is in August. That is the peak point of footfall. And anyone trading in a holiday town will say, I know that already. But actually, there's a lot of dispute around holiday towns and those who manage holiday towns, and they still try and focus on Christmas rather than the summer. And actually, it's the summer that attracts most people. And then speciality towns, those types of towns where it has something historic or cultural or characterful about them, and they don't necessarily be York or Chester. Northampton is a speciality town because of its heritage. They have a peak in August and then a smaller peak in December, and then we have things like multifunctional towns, and they're the towns that have this multiplicity of uses, employment and leisure and residential, and footfall there is very stable, and it's actually very good for retailers because it's consistent throughout the year. So not all towns are the same, and it's important to understand the type of town that you're located in to understand how you can best trade. So that's the external, that's the towns and how people shop. But we also can understand the success of stores in attracting customers. And we call that the capture rate. Other people call it the peel-off rate, but we call it the capture rate. And it's the percentage of footfall in the street or in the mall that actually enters your store. And for all intents and purposes, it's your market share. So there's all the footfall out there, and you're capturing a proportion of that every day and every week and every month. And what determines the capture rate? Well, there are three key things. Firstly, the size of the store, and I'll explain that a little in a minute. The actual physical size of the store. The brand strength of the store. So does it have a strong brand? Is it well known? Does it pull in people from a long way away? And also competition. How many people out there are competing for your type of customer? So they're the three key factors that drive capture rate. And why is a capture rate important? Well, because it's your market share, essentially it's this consistent metric of how your store is performing in relation to its location. So what you want to do is you do not want a decrease in capture rate. So if a capture rate is dropping, it means that footfall is not staying in line with footfall in the location. And if footfall in the location is dropping, then your trade is dropping by more. An increasing capture rate means that it's outperforming the location, it's grabbing market share, really positive. So knowing your capture rate enables you to help to plan and evaluate initiatives within your business and think about what you need to do in terms of staffing and ranging and promotions. So what's happening in terms of the capture rate? And this is really important for retailers because this is the key thing, really. Capture rates are declining. So in 2017, the capture rate across the UK for all different types of retail was just over 11%, 11.3%. So that means around 1 in 10 people walking past your store come in your store. So you need 10 times as many people outside to come in your store if your starting point, and that's your base point. Now that's actually been declining over the period since 2015. So what it means is that actually, whilst footfall is declining, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, numbers of customers into stores has been declining faster. And that's for a whole host of reasons. One, the internet, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But we're much more savvy, and because we're much more savvy, we don't need to browse as much as we used to. We don't need to go into as many stores as we used to. We're much more focused. We start the journey from home to destination having a much clearer idea of which stores are likely to sell what we want to buy. And that means we attract fewer window shoppers and fewer browsers. And that means the capture rate is declining. And that means you've got a smaller customer base to run your businesses from and drive your revenue. So how do you do that? It's about driving conversion and average transaction value. It has to be, because your customer numbers are unlikely to be increasing significantly. But the 11.3% isn't the same for all sectors, all categories. The capture rate varies by retailer category. Inevitably, you may say, and I would say too, department stores, which are the biggest size of store, albeit that we know they're not trading particularly well at the moment, and have a strong brand, and have limited competition, because there actually aren't that many department stores, have the highest capture rate. So out of everyone who walks past a department store, 3 out of 10 people who walk past go in. Now, it doesn't mean they buy, but it means they go in. Food and beverage, which is our grocery retailers, 17%. Food and convenience, no, that's our hospitality. Food and convenience, 16.6. Right at the bottom, health and beauty at 7.3. But these capture rates stay fairly consistent over time. So if you're in the health and beauty business, you need to expect that out of every 100 people, 7 people will come in your store. Whereas if you're in the food and beverage business, expect 17 people out of every 100 to come in your outlet. And that's a really great metric to have in your head, because you know, if you know 17 people out of 100, you know what footfall you need to drive trade. So now you know the capture rates, how can you use it to evaluate performance? Well, I've got 2 scenarios here. One is a store that's underperforming its location. One is a store that's outperforming its location. And it's actually real data, although I have to obviously keep it anonymous. So this is the store that's underperforming its location. So the left-hand graph is the store footfall. And you can see the trend line through that. And store footfall over time is actually going up, which is great. That's fantastic. But actually, when you compare that to footfall in the street, Footfall in the street is also going up, but it's going up by more than footfall in the store, which means the store's capture rate, that its market share or the percentage of footfall from the street that it's attracting, is declining. So its market share is diminishing over time. And what it needs to be is level. So the store needs to do something to increase its customer numbers even more. Contrast that with a store that's outperforming its location. And this is really interesting because this is a store that's footfall into the store is actually diminishing by a small amount. The street footfall is dropping by more than that. So its market share within its location is improving. Yes, the store is in a challenged place. The footfall in the street is not doing great. The location is not fantastic, and that's an issue for the store to look at. But actually within that location, it's growing in strength, and that's a real positive. So that's a sort of a longer term look. And you can then also use the capture rate on a week by week basis to look at best times to shift and change your business. So this store has a weekly capture rate, an average capture rate across the week of 23%. So a quarter of everyone who walks past goes in. But by hour of the day, you can see the areas in green where it has a high capture rate, it does really well. And then it has a lower capture rate in some other hours of the day, and perhaps where it has a high capture rate, the store needs to be thinking about staffing up and making sure there's enough staff in the store to serve as many people as you can and convert as many transactions as you can. So it's a way of looking tactically at the business and saying, are we maximising our sales? And then it can be used to look at the success of promotions. So you may put a lot of money into a marketing promotion or bring a new product line in, and you need to know whether it's worked. Well, if your store footfall is 5,000 a week, so you're attracting 5,000 customers a week, and footfall in the street is 100,000, your capture rate is 5%. And that's your baseline position. Now, here you've got two scenarios. One that shows that the promotion is actually really working, and one is showing that the promotion is actually just keeping pace with market. So where the promotion is working, it shows that footfall into the store has gone up by 200. So you've now got 5,200 customers. Footfall in the street has stayed the same at 100,000, and your capture rate is 5.2%, not 5% anymore. So you can see that promotion has really worked. Contrast that with an increase of 200 into your store, but footfall in the street has gone up by 5,000. So actually, whether in that situation, your capture rate is at 5%, it stays the same. So should you have carried out that promotion? Has it brought the required return on investment? That is debatable. You could just be tracking market and harnessing what's happening out there, and you may have actually been better saving your money and just keep trading normally. So it's this consistent metric that enables you to really get a really good feel and understanding of whether your money is being spent wisely within the business. So that's the capture rate. So what I'm going to do now is talk a little bit more about trends, because we're always talking about, there's lots of noise and narrative out there about the high street. This morning it was on Radio 5 again. Retailers are struggling and they're having a tough time out there. So what is really happening? Well, you can't really have a conversation around footfall trends without talking about online. You'd just be like the elephant in the room, really. So I always have to talk about online, and it is really important. And make no mistake, I think we all know that we're in midst of this huge revolution. And it's not just about retail. And everyone talks about retail and online spending, and it almost is some sort of little bubble. But it's not. It's about our life and the way we live our life. And what I've done here is just pull some graphics together around what we do and how we live. And the first one, if I can go back a bit, this just shows you really how we live our lives now. We're completely digitally engaged. We don't get off our digital devices. If we do, we sort of go into sort of cold turkey. And so the distinctions between our days that used to exist, in the morning we used to capture the news, the daytime we used to work, the early evening we used to listen to the radio, watch TV, and in the evening we might watch TV, have long gone. We are now doing a multiplicity of tasks, shopping, working, communicating, all day and every day. And that, of course, affects how we shop and the way we use retail destinations and stores. And it hasn't been affected by anything as much as services. I mean, you look at the way we have changed the way we use our service provision in our town centres. Estate agents are online, travel agents are online, post offices and deliveries are online, and banking. All of that is online, and those services in years gone by that used to drive a significant amount of footfall into our destinations, we'd go and use those services and shop at the same time. If you don't need to use the services, you don't need to necessarily go into shop, because you can shop online too. So what has this growth been? Well, up to the end of 2017, online accounted for just under 17% of our total spend, which actually is less than a lot of people think. And when I say that to people, they go, really, is that all? I thought it was way more than that. No, so over 80% of spend is still in store. But what is interesting is that's food and non-food. So when you look at non-food, it's over a quarter of all non-food spend is online now, and 3/4 is in store. So there's still quite a big chunk to play for, but the forecast is that the total online spending by the time we get to 2028 is going to go up to 30%, and on non-food will account for 48% of all non-food will be online. So around half of all of our non-food purchases will be online by 2028. So there is a massive impact. And already that has had an impact on footfall. And you can see the blue line there, and that shows our footfall data and our trend data that we've seen. And we've seen footfall decline over a number of years, and this takes it from 2012. And you can see the dotted line shows you what we're forecasting will happen to footfall up to 2028. So footfall will continue to decline. We will not see an increase in footfall. So please bear that in mind and don't expect it to increase, because it won't. So which destinations have been most affected? Well, everyone would say the high street, and actually they have been most affected, and that's been a historical impact. A lot of the loss of footfall that we saw out of the high street happened back in 2009, 2010. And overall, between 2008 and the end of last year, high streets lost about 17%, averaging just under 2% a year. Shopping centres lost less than that, and out of town, our retail parks and our shopping parks actually gained shoppers. And we probably all know and appreciate why that is. They're much more attracted to places to visit now. They've got coffee shops, they've got free parking. They've got leisure facilities very often. They're beyond our expectations from 10 years ago, where they were literally very functional places. You'd go buy paint and nails and very DIY type of products. They're much more than that now. And they've really seen an upsurge because of that. So despite this impact on footfall, despite the fact that numbers of people out there are actually dwindling and continue to dwindle, the customer journey is interesting. So where we all start our purchasing and where we all end up purchasing is a really interesting one. And this graphic is by a company called 4C, and they've identified that of all of those who start their purchase in store, 91% of those finish in a store. So you can, if you can attract people into your store, you are likely to get a conversion. And interestingly, those who start their transaction on mobile and web, of those, 25% will finish in store as well. So it's not all bad news, but what it does mean is the need to be multi-channel, the need to embrace online and the internet, social media, and be more than just store retailers. You have to be able to capture that additional layer of spend. What is also interesting is that despite the high street having suffered more than other destination types, it certainly isn't dead. And everyone always says to me when I'm being interviewed on radio or TV, is the high street dying? Is it dead? I've never seen a dead high street. I've never seen a high street close its doors and stop trading completely. But what we have seen over the last couple of years, interestingly, is that high streets have been more resilient than shopping malls. They've lost less footfall than shopping malls had since 2015. And that's a really interesting fact. And not many people would think that. They'd also always think that high streets have really struggled, particularly in the last few years. But actually, they've done, but yes, they are still losing footfall, and that's the overriding trend that we're seeing, but by not as much as shopping centres. And the reason for that is this increasing influence of experience that so much is talked about now. Everyone wants an experience, and it's all about gaining more out of our lives than just simply buying stuff. And we see this in our footfall data. The part of the day that's suffered the most is the day period, that 9 to 5 period, which traditionally has been given over to buying stuff. Now, whilst post 5 p.m. period accounts for less footfall, it's actually much more resilient. And that has, and particularly in the last couple of years, has seen actually an increase in footfall. So it's starting to be a period that's actually very, very significant. And that leisure experience is then coming back into the daytime. And that's why high streets are starting to do well, because they've been able to adapt and morph and introduce new tenants and operations and food operations that make the high streets in the daytime more attractive. And shopping centres have come late to this market. They for a whole host of reasons associated with their ownership structure and their management. Many malls, many centres, many shopping centres have yet to introduce any meaningful hospitality or leisure into their malls. They're all about retail. And as consumers, we want more experience rather than just retail. So what is driving this experience? Well, we've heard a lot about the eating out market, and it's undergone this huge boom over the last few years, and actually some of the operators are now falling foul of that. The independent operators who sold out to investors back in 2015, 2016 for huge amounts of money were sitting pretty on and those investors were hoping to expand those operations, and some of them have, and they've expanded too quickly, and there's a huge amount of competition. But if you look at the rate of consumer spending in the hospitality sector versus the retail sector, you can see the difference. You look at all retail, and actually between 2008 and 2017, growth in retail was about 8%. So it grew, but not by an enormous amount. Non-store retail, so that's our online bit, grew 113.5%, massive, but from a low base. Restaurants, casual dining chains, coffee shops, they're all seeing 25% growth, 59% growth in casual dining chains, and in coffee shops, 39% growth. So all of those, that sector, that eating out hospitality sector, has been huge and is continuing to grow. There is just too much competition out there now, and that's what these guys are facing. And in terms of the important times of the day, lunch is important, breakfast is the least important, dinner is important. So if you're open when these guys are offering dinner, then there are customers there to be had. And interestingly, the hospitality industry is the only place you can't do online. Unless you're going for a delivery, you have to go into a restaurant to eat if you want to eat out. So they are customers waiting to happen. So that's really where we are currently. We're about experience. Numbers of our shoppers is dropping, and that's inevitable, but there are opportunities to embrace multi-channel and capture more trade back. What is also happening is a diminution of the importance of what used to be our key trading days. So our bank holidays, our Easter and our May days and our August and our Boxing Day. All of these days that used to be foci for retail activity when I was young are seeing drops in footfall last year and this year. And we've been seeing this for a while. They're not as important to shoppers now as they used to be. Well, why would they be? We don't have to be hidebound by going out on bank holiday to shop. Particularly when, bank holidays used to have sales, and of course there is so much discounting around now that we are not limited by a bank holiday, but for shoppers, they aren't as important. And that is quite interesting, because it means that the attention that is focused on retail around bank holidays, maybe that's a little bit misplaced. And what happens around Christmas? And Christmas, the key trading time of our calendar, Christmas has changed, and the change that's been brought about by Christmas is Black Friday. Black Friday is huge, and I think we're a little bit confused about what Black Friday is in this country. In the UK, in the US, they have a very firm idea. It's about driving people into store. In this country, we're sort of settled on the fact it's online now, because no one likes the hassle of stores, because there were fights in aisles in Asda, and we don't want that anymore, and that's all very nasty. But what we're seeing actually is Black Friday is shaping the Christmas period. And actually Boxing Day in relation to Black Friday is not trading as well. By the time we get to Boxing Day, we've sort of had it. We've had Black Friday, you've had all of pre-Christmas, you've had Christmas Eve. Boxing Day, we're all a bit tired and exhausted by shopping. So Boxing Day, relative to Black Friday, is not trading as well. Also, last Christmas, we saw this big polarisation. We saw an uplift in footfall around Black Friday week, a very quiet few weeks between that and Christmas, and then this massive surge just before Christmas. And that is the pattern we're starting to see, and it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. So do watch out for our results, because they will be in the media, and we will publish a free-to-have report afterwards. But we're certainly seeing that shape. So given all of these changes and the structural shifts that are happening within retail, what are the outcomes for customers and ultimately then for retailers? Well, for customers, inevitably we've got greater choice, we're more knowledgeable, and it is a we. We have higher expectations, both in terms of quality of product, range of product, and price, and that is a really tricky one. And therefore we are more demanding. It's not just about stuff. It's not just about go in and build it and they will come. It's about offering that experience. And experiences really matters now because we have that choice. And therefore the point of difference makes so much more of a difference than it used to. To set yourselves apart from other retailers, that is what will drive customers. And therefore, for you as retailers, because footfall is declining, because the capture rate, the proportion of footfall from mall and street into store is also declining, so therefore customer numbers in store are fewer, you need to exploit the customers you get in your store. And you need to create an experience to pull them in the first place. And as far as possible, you need to maximize your flexibility, whether that be in your cost base, whether that be in your store layout, whether that be in your staffing, but flexibility is the overriding mantra that I'm hearing. So that's me done, everyone. If you've got questions, I'm very happy to take them. I think the presentation will be available to you, and you can reach us at spring-board.info. Thank you.